Hello everyone, this is Auditro and this is my new project called Seven Deadly Sins in Gemma 2 2 billion parameter. So basically this is an implementation of a subset of the things discussed in one of Anthropic's latest papers. By latest I mean as of the time of recording this video. Eh, it's called Emotion Concepts and Their Functions in a Large Language Model. So this paper was basically done on the Claude model, and I came across this and I decided, okay, why don't I replicate some of the claims made in this paper for the Gemma model, which is open source. So I will be going over the paper a little bit. Firstly, the portions that I have done. Then I will go into how I have done it, some of the math that has been implemented in this thing, some of the reasons why some things are done, and then I'm going to go over the paper on some other parts which I have not done, but I will be doing. So the main difference between what I have done and the paper is they have considered a large number of emotions, and I have only considered the seven deadly sins. So what does this paper say? Large language models appear to exhibit emotional reactions. This is the introduction. So I'll just actually go to the main portion. Yeah. So the way these guys have found out emotion vectors are using sample stories for each of the emotions and then doing some of the math. So I'll go into the math. So the portions that I have implemented are finding out these emotion vectors, but for the seven sins. So they're basically sinful vectors, if you want to call them that. So the seven sinful vectors I have done using the stories. And apart from that, I have done what is called steering, you know, making sure the prompt of the LLM is giving an output in the direction of the sin that we're steering in, and also given the input story, how how the model at different layers is considering the main sin present in that story. So these are some of the experiments that I've not done, with prompt based, but I found this very cool. I will be doing this. I have to find out ways and examples of how to do this with sins instead of just normal emotions because I have a lot less emotions to work with. There's seven, but this was a really cool one. So this is some of the things. So basically, the high level idea is that we'll have a set E of seven emotions. Now, E is just like attributing the original paper. This actually is S because we are dealing with sins instead of emotions. So we have pride, gluttony, envy, wrath, lust, greed, and sloth. So D model is 2304 for Gemma 2 and it has 26 layers. What I do is I basically take the average of every token for every story in each layer, skipping the first 50. Reason for skipping the first 50? If when you read a story, it usually goes like once upon a time there was in the old kingdom. These are ways you can start a story, right? So the emotion or the sin in the first few tokens are not really that present. So we can just skip that because it's just going to add noise. It has no useful information pertaining to our experiment. So we skip over that. We take mean for every emotion in every layer. We take mean of all these temporal averages that we calculated for the stories that are relevant for that emotion. So let's say I have 10 stories on envy, and at current layer L, I have taken this average. So for all the stories at layer L, I calculate the average and store it in mu EL. So this is emotion, this is layer, and this is a vector. There should be this line, but we also do a global one, which is mean across all these. So mu EL, we take mean of all such possible mu E across a single layer. Take the global. So the raw emotional vector is basically the emotional vector at layer L minus the global one. So we can kind of think that we are done. And in fact, the Anthropic paper claims, and I also have seen it experimentally, that it works if you do it this way. But think of it in this way that even in a sentence, even if we skip the first 50 tokens, the part that we are talking about, whichever story, it still has some information that is not required. Like A man was going to the shop, but he was hit by a bike. So here, the emotion is actually hurt, like not going by the sin, for example, but the man is hurt, the man is angry. But here, the man going to the market is totally irrelevant. It is just one of the things that happened. He was hit by the bike. That is the reason why he was sad, upset, hurt, angry. But him going to the market is totally irrelevant. This this extra noise is not required. So what do? We take another N stories which are neutral. They are totally emotionally neutral. They have no emotion, no scene, whatever. Just normal random things. We calculate this mu for them and we store it in a matrix. N is number of stories, D model is the dimension. So we have this Xn matrix for each of the layer. Okay. And now what we do? We do PCA. What is PCA? Principal component analysis. We find out the main directions that this neutral sound is active in. And what we do is we find out these K components using PCA. And this is done for every layer, mind you. So Xn is for every layer. We calculate the PCA of this Xn matrix for layer N. We find this and then we project our raw emotion vector or the raw sin vector onto that dimension. We project this onto that dimension and we multiply it by that component that we have obtained via PCA and we subtract this sum. This ensures that all that structural noise of man going to the market and all such things are removed. So that is how we actually get the vectors. So now the second thing is, given a story, I have to calculate how relevant it is to a sin. That is done by via this. So at a layer L, the activation or the output is XL. I dot product it. So higher the score, better the relation, and so on. Also, the curious thing is steering, where we add the certain sin and emotion so that the prompt that we have given, the output of the model is moved along this direction. So alpha is the strength, how much we want. VEL is basically the emotion vector of E at layer L, and XL is the output of that layer. So we just add this to the residual stream. Now, a very important question that I had while doing this is basically one residual block. Here we can take the XL at any point. Where do we take? That is the question. We can take here, it's not prudent. We can take here, 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 and here. So the main thing is here, a lot of things are skipped, maybe. There is a norm here, there is a norm here before this addition. Here is a norm and here is a norm. Okay. So we don't want the norms. They unnecessarily mess up our residual stream. It is relevant for the forward pass, but in for the task at hand that we have, I want the pure residual stream output of a block without having any of this in the middle. So this is where we are going to take hook pre-resid in the transformer lens library. That is what we are going to take. So let's demo it. So I have this open. It's called the Syncopledia. It's a word play on the word encyclopedia, but for synths. So there are two tools. So first, let's go to the sim analyzer. I will ask it to generate me a story. I will ask Gemini to generate a story. Generate a one paragraph story on greed sim. So it has given me a story. Let me copy that real quick. Paste it. All right. So let's analyze. At layer 17, the dominant sin is gluttony. At layer 20, the dominant sin is gluttony. Now, greed and gluttony are pretty close, so that is the thing. Let's see in one of the earlier layers. Envy is also there. Oh, okay. We can see this is the nice thing. So, in the earlier layers, there are confusions. As we go to the last layers, we are seeing that literally 26th layer, the 23rd layer, the model gives a high correlation score with greed. And if we go to the greed thing, we can see what tokens are actually highlighting, what tokens are actually ensuring that greed is the related thing. So 90 percentile is what we are taking. So like the top 10 percentile of tokens are highlighted brightly. So massive, enough, of, amassed, every coin. These are the things that actually signify that this paragraph is corresponding to greed. Okay. So according to the math, basically this is high because of those tokens. This is one of the stories. Let's do another one. Generate the same for, let's go and read this. So let's paste this and let's analyze. So the dominant is sloth. Okay, let's go a layer further. The dominant is gluttony. Let's go back. We have wrath. So again, this is the interesting thing. Due to the nature of the story, sometimes the model does think that it belongs to some other genre. I mean, we explicitly prompted this for envy, so envy is the right answer, we know. But for some reason, we are having gluttony here dominant. And let's look at why it thinks it's gluttony. So it happens that in this story, there are some tokens which are activating the greed and the gluttony portion. So it gives a wrong answer as well. So again, this is not a foolproof way. I don't think 100% accuracy is a good thing as well. So let's do steering. In steering, we can have the prompt. The man was happy to see Alias and he decided to. So let's go for that. So we see that the steering has given us a very angry output. Let's give this one because this will generate the most stark output. Um, see, for the same prompt, when we steer it with Lost, the output is totally different. If I steer it with right, again, we can see that the man is proud. We can go with Sloth. This will be interesting. So again, we can see that he was happy to see. So he's very lazy. He's putting on a shirt and a pair of trousers. So again, 2 billion parameter model. So I think there will be some limitations to how things work. But this steering prompt thing is definitive proof of that the vectors that have been generated are correct. That story was quite an anomaly that gave. So I will go into the code base. I'll take one of the stories from here. Let's see. So this is one of the stories of Lost, and we are at level 17. So we can see the dominance in is Lost. Again, picking up one from the thing that it has seen before is kind of counterintuitive, but yeah, it does work for a lot of other stories. This entire code base is open source, so I recommend you to like download, run. It's very friendly. It has UV lock, so you won't be running into Python version hell or anything. So you can just download this, run. I have made the emotion vectors that I have got public on the GitHub as well. So please download them and verify if you want to, or you can generate your own set of emotion vectors or sin vectors with your own stories. That is also perfectly fine. So this is the code base. It's a very simple code base that I have kept so that it's reproducible and easily understandable. So anthropic emotions are basically the emotions that they talked about in their paper. I had a list of these to, have a kind of reference of how to work with them. These are some of the story prompts that they used. I have used neither of them, but this is just an example. So that in the future, if I need some leads on how to get more data, or one of you using the repository needs more data, you can utilize this. Uh, So the core part of this entire library, entire tool is basically three files. The sinful vector generation raw. This file is responsible for doing this part of these equations. This is what is implemented here. So we have the paths and the sins. Token start is 15 because we're skipping the first 51. We calculate here using the slicing part. And then we store them in a nice PT file. Then we go to clean. This is where we actually do the PCA and make sure that the vectors are clean. Lastly, Synclopedia is a Streamlit app, as you saw. So it takes these two pages and it works. So it's pretty simple. Data prep is where I actually kept the stories. And this parse one split each of these one files into 10 different files in data. That is how I've done. And the same way, neutral, I got those. All these stories were generated using Gemini. Like in the original paper, they did it using Claude since they were like Anthropic. But I had Gemini access, so I did it with Gemini. So the blog post will be coming here soon. I have it here, but I have not posted it. So yeah, find the GitHub in the description below. Find the blog in the description below. This video, you of course are watching. The paper is linked in the GitHub. I will also link it below. Make sure that you utilize it. If you want to extend to it with the other parts, you can of course extend to it.